Don't let her drink that. The little girl's voice sliced through the ballroom so suddenly that the string quartet missed an entire note. 12-year-old Grace Whitmore froze with the crystal glass halfway to her lips. Across the candlelit table, Ethan Whitmore turned sharply in his chair. Behind Grace, Vanessa Hale smiled too slowly. And for one strange second, the only sound in the mansion was the soft clink of ice touching glass. 3 hours earlier, Whitmore Mansion had smelled like polished wood, expensive perfume, and rain drifting in from the Atlanta hills. Staff moved quietly beneath chandeliers the size of small cars while cameras flashed near the grand staircase downstairs. The Whitmore Foundation Gala happened every fall, and every year the same people came wearing the same cold smiles and million-dollar watches. Maya Brooks had never seen so much glass in one house before. Glass walls, glass tables, glass candle holders that looked too delicate to touch. Even the water pitchers sparkled under the dining room lights like they belonged in a museum instead of on a table. She kept her eyes lowered as she followed her mother through the service hallway carrying folded linen napkins against her chest. "Don't stare," Denise whispered softly without looking at her. "Just do your job and stay close to me tonight." Maya nodded. Her sneakers squeaked once against the marble floor. She immediately hated the sound. Denise worked temporary catering jobs all over Buckhead when she could get them. Hotels, weddings, political dinners. Rich people liked invisible workers. That was the rule Maya had learned young. Be polite. Be quiet. Don't touch anything expensive. Don't make wealthy people notice you unless they wanted something. But as Maya passed the open pantry beside the east dining room, something made her slow down. At first it was only a smell. Bitter. Sharp, like burned almonds mixed with lemon cleaner. Then she saw Vanessa Hale standing alone beside a silver tray of drinks. Vanessa's white gown shimmered under the pantry light while rain tapped softly against the narrow window above the sink. One manicured hand held a tiny blue glass bottle no bigger than a travel perfume vial. The other steadied Grace's crystal glass. Maya stopped moving. Vanessa tilted the bottle carefully. 1 drop. 2. 3. Then she stirred the liquid with a silver spoon and wiped the rim of the glass with a folded linen cloth. Calm, precise, practiced. Maya should have walked away then. She knew that. But the spoon slipped from her own trembling fingers and hit the pantry tile with a metallic crack. Vanessa turned immediately. Not startled. Not angry. Somehow that felt worse. Her eyes landed on Maya's face in the reflection of the pantry door first before she slowly looked at her directly. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked quietly. Maya swallowed hard. "I was bringing napkins." Vanessa studied her for another moment, then smiled with only part of her mouth. "Your mother works very hard here, doesn't she?" Maya didn't answer. Vanessa stepped closer, the scent of her perfume mixing strangely with the bitter smell still hanging near the glass. "People lose jobs over misunderstandings all the time," she said softly. "Especially people who need those jobs." Then she slid the tiny blue bottle into her clutch purse. Maya looked down at the tray again. One glass sat slightly apart from the others. A thin cloudy film drifted slowly near the bottom beneath the floating lemon slice. And taped discreetly beneath the base of that glass was a tiny white card with one handwritten word in silver ink. "Grace, Grace." Maya stared at the small silver lettering beneath the base of the crystal glass while the rain thickened softly against the pantry window. For a second, everything inside her wanted to pretend she had not seen any of it. The bottle, the cloudy swirl near the lemon slice, Vanessa's voice. But then she remembered the way her mother's hands shook every Friday night when rent was due, and the memory made something harden quietly inside her chest. Vanessa adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist and stepped closer until Maya could see tiny beads of rainwater caught in the hem of her white sleeve. "You're a smart little girl," she said gently. "Smart girls know when to stay out of adult business." Maya's fingers tightened around the stack of folded napkins. Vanessa reached into her clutch and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. The green paper looked unnaturally bright beneath the pantry lights. "Take this," Vanessa said softly. "Buy yourself something nice. And forget what you think you saw." Maya looked at the money but did not reach for it. My mom said not to take things from strangers. Vanessa's smile flickered almost invisibly. Somewhere deeper inside the mansion, laughter rolled through the ballroom while glasses clinked together. The gala music started again as if nothing dangerous could possibly exist inside a room filled with chandeliers and donors in black tuxedos. Then Denise's voice echoed faintly from the service hallway. Maya. Vanessa folded the bill once and slid it back into her purse. Go help your mother, she said. Calm. Elegant. Perfect. Maya stepped away carefully, but before she left the pantry, her eyes dropped once more to the silver tray. There were 6 crystal glasses. Only one had the tiny white name card beneath it. Grace. 20 minutes later, the mansion dining room glowed gold beneath candlelight while servers moved silently between politicians, surgeons, board members, and local news cameras. Ethan Whitmore sat at the center of the table with Grace beside him and Vanessa on his other side, her hand resting lightly against his sleeve whenever someone congratulated them on the engagement. Maya stood near the kitchen entrance holding a pitcher of ice water she was barely strong enough to carry. She watched Grace closely now. The girl looked pale under the chandelier lights. Not sick exactly, just tired in a way children were not supposed to look. At one point Grace rubbed her fingers together slowly like she was trying to wake them up. You okay, sweetheart? Ethan asked quietly. Just sleepy, Grace murmured. Vanessa answered before Grace could say more. The neurologist said fatigue is normal with stress. Ethan nodded once, but something about the sentence seemed to stay with him longer than it should have. Maya noticed that too. A waiter leaned close to refill wine glasses while soft jazz drifted through hidden ceiling speakers. Across the room, a television above the service bar played muted weather coverage about incoming storms north of Atlanta. Everything looked expensive, controlled, safe. Then Maya saw Vanessa's hand move beneath the tablecloth. Just for a second. Her fingers touched the stem of Grace's glass lightly, almost protectively. Too protectively. Maya's stomach twisted hard. Grace lifted the drink toward her mouth. And before Maya could stop herself, she was already moving across the marble floor. Don't let her drink that. The room snapped silent so fast even the orchestra faltered. Grace froze. Ethan stood halfway from his chair. Vanessa turned slowly toward Maya with an expression almost calm enough to be frightening. Excuse me? She asked softly. Maya's hands shook at her sides, but she pointed directly at the crystal glass. Please, she whispered. Please don't let her drink it. Nobody moved. Then Ethan's eyes dropped to the glass in his daughter's hand. And for the briefest moment, something inside him seemed to hesitate when he noticed a faint cloudy residue slowly circling beneath the floating lemon slice. The cloudy residue turned slowly beneath the lemon slice while nobody at the table seemed willing to breathe first. Ethan Whitmore kept his eyes on the glass in Grace's hand, but his voice stayed controlled when he finally spoke. Maya, he said carefully, come here. The little girl hesitated near the end of the dining table. Denise looked like she might collapse where she stood beside the service doors. Sir, I'm so sorry, she rushed out quietly. She didn't mean to interrupt. I asked the child a question. Ethan replied without raising his voice. The room became still again. Maya stepped forward slowly across the marble floor. Her shoes made almost no sound now. Vanessa rested one elegant hand against the edge of the tablecloth and gave a soft laugh meant for the guests. Honestly, she said, smiling thinly, I think the poor thing frightened herself, but Maya noticed something strange. Vanessa's water glass sat untouched beside her dinner plate. No lemon. No ice. Ethan looked down at Maya. Why did you say that? He asked. Maya swallowed once. Because I saw her put something in Grace's drink. Around the table, several guests shifted uncomfortably. Someone near the far end coughed into a napkin. Vanessa tilted her head slowly as though speaking to a nervous child. Sweetheart, she said gently. That was liquid melatonin. Grace has trouble sleeping. Then why did you hide it? Maya asked quietly. Vanessa's smile flickered. Only for a second. But Ethan saw it. The billionaire's fingers paused against the stem of his wine glass before he leaned back slightly in his chair. "You gave Grace medication without telling me?" he asked. Vanessa answered too quickly. "Her neurologist approved it weeks ago." "Which neurologist?" Ethan asked. Vanessa blinked once. "Dr. Feldman." Ethan's expression did not change, but Maya noticed his jaw tighten very slightly. "Dr. Feldman retired in June," he said. A strange silence spread across the room. Vanessa recovered almost immediately. "I meant Dr. Keller. Honestly, Ethan, this entire conversation is ridiculous." But the correction came too fast, too polished. Grace lowered the crystal glass slowly onto the tablecloth without drinking. Maya saw the girl's hand trembling. "Daddy," Grace said softly, "I don't like the medicine she gives me." Vanessa turned toward her immediately. "Grace, honey, you said it helps you relax." Grace looked confused now, almost embarrassed. "It makes my arms feel heavy." Ethan's eyes shifted toward Vanessa again. No anger yet, just attention. Dangerous attention. One of the waiters quietly approached to clear plates, but Ethan lifted two fingers slightly without looking away from the glass. "Leave everything." The waiter froze and stepped back. Rain pressed harder against the mansion windows, while somewhere down the hallway, a muted television continued reporting storm warnings across northern Georgia. The ordinary sound made the silence at the table feel even colder. Maya looked again at the crystal glass. Then her eyes moved lower. Beneath the base, the tiny white name card had partially slipped loose from condensation. Grace. And under that card was something else. A second folded slip of paper taped underneath. Small enough nobody would notice unless they were. Looking closely, Maya stepped nearer before fear could stop her. "Wait," she whispered. Ethan's eyes moved immediately toward her. Maya pointed carefully beneath the glass. "There's something under it." Vanessa stood so suddenly her chair scraped against the marble floor. This has gone far enough. But Ethan was already reaching for the glass himself. He lifted it slowly. The tiny folded paper dropped onto the white tablecloth beside his daughter's plate. Nobody spoke while Ethan unfolded it. It was not a note. Not exactly. It was a pharmacy label torn unevenly from a prescription bottle. The patient name had been ripped away, but one line remained perfectly readable beneath the dining room chandelier. "Warning. May cause cognitive impairment in minors." The warning label rested in Ethan Whitmore's hand, while rainwater crawled slowly down the towering dining room windows behind him. Nobody at the table touched their food anymore. The orchestra in the next room had stopped completely. Vanessa looked at the torn pharmacy label for barely half a second before recovering her smile again. "That proves absolutely nothing," she said calmly. "It could have come from any prescription bottle in this house." A man near the end of the table cleared his throat awkwardly. "Ethan," he said carefully, "perhaps this conversation should continue privately." Several guests nodded immediately, relieved by the suggestion. Wealthy people knew how to survive uncomfortable moments. They buried them quietly under better lighting and lower voices. Ethan still held the paper between two fingers. "Where did this come from?" he asked. Maya answered before Vanessa could. "It was taped under Grace's glass." Vanessa gave a soft laugh that did not quite reach her eyes. "By whom? Her?" she asked gently, looking toward Maya now for the first time like she was something unpleasant tracked in from the rain. "You really think a child from the catering staff understands prescription labels?" Denise stepped forward immediately. "Sir, I'm sorry," she whispered, panic leaking into every word. "Please don't fire us. Maya shouldn't have touched anything." Maya looked at her mother quickly. Denise's eyes stayed lowered toward the floor. Not because she was ashamed of Maya, because she was terrified. Ethan noticed that too. Before he could speak, another voice entered smoothly from the far side of the room. "Mr. Whitmore." Harold Bennett, the family attorney, adjusted his cufflinks as he approached the table. Silver-haired, immaculate, calm in the way expensive lawyers always seemed calm. "I strongly recommend we de-escalate this situation before rumors spread through the gala." Vanessa exhaled softly as if grateful someone reasonable had finally arrived. Exactly, she said. This poor child clearly misunderstood something. Harold's attention shifted briefly toward Maya. Not cruel. Worse. Professional. Young lady, he said politely. Do you know what happens when serious accusations are made without evidence? Maya said nothing. People get hurt, Harold continued. Careers. Reputations. Families. The word families landed strangely in the room. Grace lowered her eyes toward her untouched drink. Maya noticed her fingers rubbing slowly against the edge of her sleeve again. Nervous. Small. Almost invisible movements. Harold looked back at Ethan. With respect, sir. Allowing a staff member's child to interrupt dinner this way sets a dangerous precedent. Staff member's child. Maya felt the phrase settle coldly into the room around her. Suddenly she became aware of everything again. The wet cuff of her borrowed black cardigan. The tiny grease stain on her sleeve from carrying serving trays earlier. The way none of the guests would quite look directly at her now. Like she had become noise instead of a person. Vanessa stepped closer beside Ethan and rested a hand lightly against his shoulder. Grace has had a difficult year medically, she said softly. The stress alone could explain confusion. Fatigue, anxiety? Maya looked up sharply. She said her arms feel heavy after you make the drinks. The room went quiet again. Vanessa's expression barely changed, but one of her fingernails tapped once against Ethan's jacket sleeve before stopping. Children repeat things, Vanessa replied smoothly, especially when they want attention. Harold nodded toward security near the ballroom entrance. Perhaps it would be best if the child waited with her mother downstairs until this is sorted out. One of the security men immediately stepped forward. Not rough, not angry, just efficient. Maya felt Denise's trembling hand touch her shoulder gently. Come on, baby, her mother whispered. Please. Maya's throat tightened, but she did not move yet. Instead, she slowly opened her hand. Inside it was the folded linen cloth she had hidden since leaving the pantry. White fabric. Soft. Expensive. One corner carried a faint pale smear almost invisible beneath the chandelier light. Vanessa saw it instantly, and for the first time all night she lost control for less than a second. Where did you get that? She asked too fast. Ethan's eyes moved immediately from Vanessa's face to the cloth in Maya's hand. Then lower, to Vanessa's own dinner place setting. Her silver spoon was missing. The missing spoon seemed to change the temperature of the room. Ethan Whitmore looked slowly across the table toward Vanessa's place setting where the linen napkin sat perfectly folded beside an empty space on the polished charger plate. Vanessa followed his eyes immediately. A server probably cleared it, she said smoothly. Too smoothly. Ethan did not answer. Maya still held the folded linen cloth tightly in both hands, while the security guard lingered awkwardly nearby, waiting for instructions no one was giving anymore. Rain hammered harder against the tall windows now, washing silver streaks down the black glass behind the dining room. Somewhere deeper inside the mansion, a dryer hummed softly from the lower service level. Ordinary sounds. Safe sounds. But nothing in the room felt safe anymore. Ethan extended his hand toward Maya. May I see the cloth? He asked quietly. Denise looked terrified again, but Maya stepped forward and placed the linen carefully into his palm. Ethan unfolded it slowly beneath the chandelier light. At first the stain looked almost invisible. Then he tilted the fabric slightly. A pale chalky streak shimmered near the edge of the cloth. Ethan stared at it longer than anyone expected. This is from the rim of the glass, Maya said softly. She wiped it after she stirred it. Vanessa crossed her arms gently over herself, almost amused now. Ethan, this is insane. We're discussing table linens because a frightened child imagined a conspiracy. Harold Bennett nodded immediately. Sir, with respect, I strongly suggest we move this discussion somewhere private before the press downstairs notices tension at the head table. Ethan still did not look away from the cloth. Maya watched something shifting quietly behind his eyes now. Not belief yet. Worse, memory. Grace, Ethan said suddenly. His daughter looked up. Last month at the lake house, he asked carefully. You got sick after dinner. Do you remember what you drank? Grace frowned slightly. Lemon water. Vanessa's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Ethan continued watching the pale streak on the cloth. And in Palm Beach? Grace hesitated. The tea Vanessa made. Silence spread slowly outward from the center of the table like cold water. Vanessa laughed once under her breath. Children get headaches, Ethan. They get tired. You're letting this become absurd. But Ethan's fingers had stopped moving entirely against the linen. Maya noticed it before anyone else. The billionaire had gone completely still. Then he turned the cloth over. Sewn into one corner in tiny dark stitching were the initials W.H. Whitmore House. But beneath the initials, almost hidden inside the fold, was another mark. A small faded brown stain no larger than a fingerprint. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. Where exactly did you find this? He asked Maya. On the pantry counter, Maya answered. Next to the tray. Vanessa stepped in quickly. Because that's where the serving staff keeps linens. No, Maya said quietly. This one was under the blue bottle. Vanessa turned toward her sharply enough this time that several guests visibly shifted in their seats. You need to stop talking. The sentence came out colder than before. Not loud, controlled, but stripped clean of warmth. Ethan looked at Vanessa slowly after hearing it. Maya saw the moment he noticed something else too. Vanessa's perfume, bitter underneath the jasmine. The exact same sharp almond scent lingering faintly on the cloth in his hand. His gaze dropped toward Vanessa's clutch purse resting beside her chair. Small, white leather, slightly unzipped now from where she had shoved the $100 bill back inside earlier. And just barely visible through the opening was the curved edge of a tiny blue glass bottle. The tiny blue bottle remained half visible inside Vanessa's clutch, while nobody at the table seemed willing to acknowledge it directly. Ethan Whitmore folded the linen cloth once more with slow, deliberate precision before setting it beside his untouched plate. Then he looked toward the head of security standing near the ballroom doors. Mr. Calloway, he said evenly, please ask Dr. Mercer to come upstairs. Vanessa's eyes shifted immediately. Ethan, she said softly, you're seriously going to test water because a child got frightened? I'm asking my physician to examine something in my house, Ethan replied. That shouldn't concern anyone. The sentence sounded polite, but Maya noticed something had changed underneath it. Ethan no longer sounded embarrassed. He sounded careful. Calloway nodded once and quietly stepped from the dining room. Harold Bennett adjusted his tie. Sir, perhaps we should avoid escalating this until facts are confirmed. Exactly, Vanessa added gently. Grace is already anxious enough. Grace lowered her eyes at the word anxious. Maya noticed that too. The girl always seemed to shrink slightly whenever adults described her instead of listening to her. Ethan watched his daughter for a long moment before speaking again. Grace, he asked quietly, when Vanessa gives you supplements, where does she keep them? Vanessa answered first. In the upstairs bathroom cabinet. I asked Grace. The room cooled another degree. Grace hesitated. Sometimes the bathroom, she whispered. Sometimes the kitchen pantry. Vanessa gave a small tired sigh as though dealing with unnecessary drama. Because travel routines change, Ethan. He nodded once. Calm. Controlled. But Maya saw him memorize every word. Dinner ended shortly afterward without anyone really eating. Guests drifted downstairs toward the ballroom, pretending not to stare while the orchestra resumed softly beneath the enormous staircase. Rain pressed against the mansion windows in silver sheets now, and thunder rolled low over the Atlanta hills. Maya sat quietly at the far end of the service kitchen while Denise folded and used napkins with shaking hands beside the industrial dishwasher. The kitchen television murmured faintly about flash flood warnings, while someone loaded silver trays into the sink. You shouldn't have done that upstairs, Denise whispered without looking at her. Maya stared down at the paper cup of hot chocolate one of the older servers had given her. I know. Denise finally stopped folding linens. Then why did you? Maya was quiet for a moment. Because Grace looked scared before she even touched the glass. Denise closed her eyes briefly. Tiredness moved across her face like something physical. People like us don't survive by accusing people like them, she said softly. Maya tightened both hands around the warm paper cup. I wasn't trying to accuse her. She looked toward the rain-dark kitchen window. I just didn't want Grace to think nobody saw. Denise said nothing after that. Upstairs, Ethan stood alone inside his private study, while thunder vibrated faintly through the mansion walls. The room smelled like leather bindings, coffee gone cold, and the cedar smoke from the fireplace Vanessa always insisted made the house feel welcoming. Ethan opened his phone and quietly replayed a voicemail from Grace's neurologist sent 2 months earlier. Her cognitive scans are normal, Ethan. I still don't believe we're dealing with a neurological decline. Ethan paused the message, then replayed the next part. Something about the symptom pattern feels externally influenced. Externally influenced. Ethan stared out at the rain for several seconds before opening the locked medical file folder Calloway had brought from the family office downstairs. Inside were months of reports Vanessa had personally organized for him. Tabs, notes, prescription schedules, appointment summaries, perfectly arranged. Too perfectly arranged. Ethan turned another page, then stopped completely. One prescription refill date listed medication administered to Grace. During the exact week Vanessa had publicly claimed Grace stopped taking supplements altogether. Ethan slowly looked back toward the closed study door. And for the first time in months, he realized Vanessa had not merely been helping manage his daughter's care. She had been controlling every piece of information reaching him. The study remained quiet except for the ticking of the antique clock above Ethan Whitmore's fireplace and the steady rain against the dark windows overlooking the estate gardens. Ethan closed Grace's medical file slowly while Calloway stood near the door waiting for instructions. Bring me the pantry footage from tonight, Ethan said calmly. All of it. Calloway hesitated. Sir. The east pantry camera appears to have a gap. Ethan looked up. How long? 11 minutes. The answer settled heavily into the room. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair. Convenient. Calloway nodded once. There is one secondary hallway camera still uploading from backup storage. Ethan's eyes shifted toward the blinking security monitor on the side table. Uploading. 23%. He stared at the progress bar for a moment without speaking. Then he asked quietly, Who has authority to disable interior cameras? You, me, and Miss Hale. Ethan gave the smallest nod. Downstairs in the service kitchen, Maya sat near the humming refrigerator, while Denise packed untouched dinner rolls into foil trays for the staff to take home. The fluorescent kitchen lights buzzed faintly overhead. Somewhere nearby, a washing machine thumped rhythmically through another cycle. Maya still held the folded linen cloth in her lap. Grace appeared silently in the kitchen doorway wearing a gray cashmere cardigan over her gala dress. For a second, neither girl spoke. Grace looked smaller down here away from the chandeliers and cameras upstairs. Everybody's mad at you, Grace said softly. Maya looked down at the cloth. I know. Grace stepped farther inside. Why did you still say it? Maya thought about the answer for several seconds. Because when grown-ups are scared, they start pretending things are normal. Grace's eyes flickered slightly. That sentence sounded too true. For someone Maya's age. Denise glanced nervously toward the hallway. You shouldn't be down here, sweetheart, she whispered to Grace. Your father's probably looking for you. Grace rubbed her fingers together again. Vanessa says I do that because of anxiety. Maya noticed it immediately. You only do it after you drink things she gives you. Grace froze. Very small. But enough. Upstairs, Ethan stood inside the upstairs lounge bar, while Vanessa poured herself sparkling water with steady hands. The mansion lights reflected softly against the marble counters and polished wine cabinets around them. She wore calm beautifully. You're frightening, Grace, she said gently without turning around. Ethan watched her carefully. Am I? Vanessa handed him a glass. This entire situation started because a child wanted attention. Ethan accepted the glass but did not drink. Maya refused money from you. Vanessa's hand paused almost invisibly over the bottle cap. "Excuse me?" She said you offered her cash to stay quiet. Vanessa gave a soft, incredulous laugh. "Ethan, she's a little girl from a struggling family. Of course she'd say whatever makes her seem important." Ethan remained still for another moment. Then very casually, he set his untouched glass beside hers on the marble counter. Two identical crystal glasses beneath warm cabinet lighting. "Then switch with me," he said quietly. Vanessa looked at him. "What? Take mine." Silence. Rain slid down the tall windows behind them in silver rivers. Somewhere downstairs the grandfather clock struck midnight. Vanessa smiled again, but slower now. "You cannot seriously believe I would poison anyone." "I didn't say poison." Ethan's voice stayed perfectly calm. "I asked you to switch glasses." Vanessa's fingers tightened slightly around the stem of her own drink, just enough for Ethan to notice. Then her phone vibrated sharply against the marble countertop between them. Both of them looked down at the screen automatically. One unread text message glowed across the display before Vanessa could grab it. "Did you erase the hallway backup too?" Ethan lifted his eyes slowly toward her face. And for the first time all night, Vanessa looked not offended, not angry, cornered. Then a quiet voice spoke from the lounge doorway behind Ethan. "I told you," Maya said softly. "She's scared of the cameras now." Vanessa looked past Ethan toward the little girl standing there beside Calloway. And in that moment, she finally understood the child was no longer alone. Vanessa's phone remained face up on the marble counter between them, while the rain battered the mansion windows hard enough to blur the city lights below the hill. Nobody moved immediately after Maya spoke. Ethan Whitmore stood perfectly still with one hand resting near the untouched crystal glasses. Calloway lingered near the lounge doorway beside Maya. Silent now in the way trained security men became silent when situations turned dangerous. Vanessa picked up her phone at last. "This proves nothing," she said quietly. "A staff member could have sent that message." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then unlocked the phone. Vanessa's eyes sharpened slightly. "Excuse me?" "Unlock it." The room seemed to tighten around the sentence. Vanessa laughed softly under her breath. "Ethan, you cannot seriously expect me to hand over my private messages because a frightened child invented a story." Maya looked down briefly at the folded linen cloth still in her hands. Then she spoke carefully. "The hallway camera isn't the only one." Ethan turned toward her immediately. Vanessa did too. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. Maya swallowed once. "When I dropped the spoon in the pantry, I saw another red light blinking in the wine room glass." Calloway frowned slightly. "Reflection camera." Ethan's gaze shifted instantly toward him. Calloway nodded. "The backup security lens for the wine inventory system reflects through the pantry door glass at certain angles." Vanessa's face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Ethan saw it. "Bring it up," he said calmly. 5 minutes later, the upstairs study glowed cold blue from the security monitor, while thunder rolled low beyond the mansion walls. Harold Bennett stood near the fireplace now, no longer relaxed. Denise remained near the doorway with both arms wrapped tightly around herself while Grace sat quietly on the leather sofa beside Maya. The recovered footage loaded slowly frame by frame across the screen. Pantry view through reflected glass. Grainy, distorted, but clear enough. Vanessa appeared first beside the silver tray. She removed the tiny blue bottle from her clutch. 3 drops into Grace's glass. Stirring, wiping the rim. Ethan did not blink once during the footage. Maya watched his face carefully now. It looked less like anger than something collapsing inward silently. Then the footage continued farther than anyone expected. Vanessa stepped aside and lifted her phone. Audio from the hallway security feed crackled faintly through the speakers. "No," Vanessa whispered sharply into the phone. "Not enough to hurt her permanently. Just enough that Ethan keeps signing the guardianship recommendations." The room went completely still. Grace looked up slowly from the sofa. Vanessa's recorded voice continued through static. "If the board believes the girl's unstable, The trust remains controllable until after the marriage. Ethan's hand tightened once against the edge of the desk. That was all. But his knuckles lost all color. Grace stared at the monitor like she had stopped understanding the room around her. She knew, Grace whispered faintly. She knew I wasn't really sick. Ethan finally looked toward his daughter. And for the first time that night, Maya saw something break openly inside him. Not because of the money, not because of the betrayal, because Grace looked relieved. Relieved to discover she had not imagined her own suffering. Vanessa took one step forward. Ethan, listen to me carefully. You're hearing fragments out of context. Nobody answered her. Harold Bennett slowly removed his glasses. Calloway had already moved closer to the study door without being asked. Maya sat very still beside Grace while the girl's fingers shook against the sleeve of her cardigan. I thought something was wrong with my brain, Grace whispered. Ethan closed his eyes briefly at the sentence. Months of doctors, tests, medications, every exhausted look on Grace's face. Every time she had said she felt strange. Every moment he had accepted Vanessa's explanations because they sounded cleaner than uncertainty. Ethan opened his eyes again and looked directly at Maya, the little girl from the kitchen who had been the only person in his entire house willing to say the truth out loud. Then his gaze shifted calmly toward Vanessa. So calm now it became frightening. Ethan reached forward, stopped the security footage, and placed the blue glass bottle carefully onto the desk beside the frozen image of Vanessa on the monitor. Then he spoke without raising his voice. Call my attorney. By 2:30 in the morning, Whitmore Mansion no longer sounded like a gala. The orchestra had gone home. The caterers moved quietly through half-dark hallways collecting abandoned champagne glasses and cold plates no one had finished. Rain still whispered against the windows, softer now, like the storm had finally exhausted itself. Upstairs, Vanessa Hale sat across from two attorneys in Ethan Whitmore's study, while Calloway remained stationed near the door. Her white gown looked different now beneath the harsh overhead lighting. Less elegant, more calculated. Ethan stood near the fireplace listening as Harold Bennett read through emergency injunction paperwork in a careful, measured voice. The board has already been notified, Harold said quietly. Miss Hale's access to the Whitmore Family Trust and medical authorization accounts has been suspended pending investigation. Vanessa looked at Ethan then. You're destroying both our lives because of one manipulated video and a frightened child. Ethan did not answer immediately. He stared instead at the frozen image on the security monitor beside his desk. Grace's glass. Vanessa's hand. 3 drops falling into clear liquid. No, he said at last. I almost destroyed my daughter's life because I stopped listening to her. Vanessa's expression tightened for the first time without recovery. 30 minutes later, Calloway escorted her from the mansion through the private garage entrance, while reporters still waited outside the front gates, unaware the engagement had ended upstairs hours earlier. No shouting, no scene, just silence and the sound of heels fading across concrete. By sunrise, Whitmore Health Group's board initiated a formal internal review of every medical recommendation connected to Grace's treatment over the previous year. Dr. Mercer's lab report confirmed traces of non-prescribed sedatives in the recovered liquid from the shattered glass fragments and linen cloth. Ethan personally ordered independent oversight for all pediatric trust programs under the Whitmore Foundation after discovering Vanessa had redirected portions of neurological care funding toward Shell, consulting accounts tied to one of her associates. Quiet corruption hidden beneath charity language and polished dinners. Denise expected to lose her job anyway. People like them usually disappeared after wealthy scandals. Instead, Ethan met her privately in the kitchen just after dawn, while exhausted staff drank burnt coffee beneath the fluorescent lights. Denise stood immediately when he entered. Mr. Whitmore, I swear Maya never meant... Your daughter protected mine. Ethan interrupted softly. Denise stopped speaking. Ethan placed an envelope carefully on the stainless steel counter between them. Not cash. Legal documents.
Permanent emploiement protection.
Back pay adjustments the catering agency had quietly withheld for months. Educational trust paperwork for Maya. independent legal representation if the press tried contacting the family. Denise stared at the papers without touching them. "Why?" she whispered. Ethan looked toward the kitchen doorway where Maya sat beside Grace, sharing a grilled cheese sandwich cut unevenly down the middle. "Because nobody protected people who spoke up in this house," he said quietly. "That changes now." Grace no longer looked pale under the kitchen lights. Tired, yes, but lighter somehow, like someone had finally opened a locked room she'd been trapped inside too long. Maya still wore the same squeaking sneakers from the night before. Ethan noticed that, without saying anything, he quietly removed his wool coat and draped it over the back of Maya's chair because the kitchen had turned cold after the storm. Maya looked up at him carefully. "You don't have to do that," she said. Ethan gave the smallest tired smile. "I know." For a moment nobody spoke. The refrigerator hummed softly nearby while morning light slowly brightened the rain-streaked windows above the sink. Then Grace reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out the folded linen cloth Maya had saved from the pantry. The pale stain had already dried. Grace placed it gently into Maya's hands. "You kept this even when everyone thought you were wrong," she said quietly. Maya looked down at the cloth for a second. "I didn't want you to think nobody saw what was happening." Ethan turned away slightly at the sentence, one hand pressing briefly against his mouth. The billionaire who had spent years commanding boardrooms and hospitals suddenly could not speak at all. Outside, dawn finally broke over Whitmore Mansion. And in the small kitchen beneath the enormous house, the little girl nobody had wanted at the table became the only voice that had told the truth.